I'm Lisa Harrison, and today I'm speaking with David Icke. Since the early 90s, David has been one of the leading researchers on the subject of the global conspiracy, aka Illuminati, New World Order. Now, if you're new to this information, or perhaps in what I would call the initial stages of your questioning, of your awakening, starting to question just how the world works, starting to see that life, maybe even reality itself, may not be what you were told, then do stick around, because you may just have some of your questions answered. And with that, I'd like to welcome David. David, it's an absolute pleasure for me to be speaking with you. I'm very grateful for the opportunity.
Oh, thanks, Lisa. Yeah, it's a pleasure. Really good. I'm really looking forward to coming to Australia soon, because I haven't been there for a while. In fact, the last time I came to Australia, I came and spoke in Melbourne in 2009, and I flew from Britain. Never got into Australia in time. In the few days that I was there, discovered Red Bull, which is total rubbish. But on the morning of the event in Melbourne, I'm asleep in the dressing room. I'm still in London. I'm in sleep time. So I discovered as an emergency Red Bull, and then I got through the talk, which was great. You get amazing energy when you do that anyway. And then the next day I flew home. So that's the craziest visit to Australia I've ever done, because it took me about 3 or 4 weeks to get over it.
I'm sure it did.
This time I'm there a bit longer, so it's a bit more sensible.
Yes, you're going to be in quite a few states and here for quite a while, from what I understand. And you've got a lot of Australians very excited about it.
Yeah, and I'm going to a place that, since I kind of consciously started to awaken 21 years ago, that I've always been focusing on. I got to go there. I want to go there, and that's what we British people call Ayers Rock. Mm-hmm. I think it's a really powerful place, and I'm really looking forward to going there. Yes,
that's on my to-do list as well, I must say.
Yeah, it's I've known people who've been there, and it's one of those places. The Earth is crisscrossed by energetic lines of force, and some of the places where these lines cross and create massive vortex of energy are actually marked by things like stone circles, like Stonehenge and Avebury in Britain, and other places, and temples in Asia and stuff like that. Freemasons put some of their major temples on these vortex points, but there are also places which are kind of, if you like, natural phenomena, like Ayers Rock, which also kind of are on these points. And I'm really looking forward to going there and feeling the power of the place, because I'm sure it's going to be immense.
Yes, from all the feedback I've had from people who spent time there, it is. You're in for a treat.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to it. What's the weather like in September and October? Because you always know when it's summer in Britain, because I've got a bloody great red nose and red face, and I like the sun, but it don't seem to like me very much if I'm in it for too long. So I'm going to be the one in the big floppy hat.
Well, you should be quite comfortable here then, because at the moment we are having and have had the freakiest winter. It started early. It went from summer to winter. We forgot autumn, spring, whatever it was supposed to be altogether. And
Right.
It's been long. It's been cold. It's been the coldest in most states for like 13 years.
It's global warming, you see.
Yes, I know.
It's global warming that's making everywhere colder.
It's just as well we
Al
just
Gore
brought in that
told me.
carbon tax to offset it all.
Yeah, exactly. It's funny. It's like not spooky, but it's a bit surreal, Lisa, at the moment, because I'm watching my books from the mid '90s being read on the television news at the moment, in terms of unfolding events, and because I know that one of the big issues in Australia at the moment is this carbon tax, and not only that, but other things, that this great lie about human-caused global warming, or climate change, as they called it after the temperatures started falling year after year. an example of something that I call no problem reaction solution.
That's
You know,
perfect.
you can create a problem, a real one, like a terrorist attack, which you set up and blame some terrorist for, or you can create a global economic crash, which then you can offer your solutions for, which is changing the structure of global finance in the way you want. And you can create wars, which of course are big problems, and the solution is to advance this agenda of more and more conquest of countries like Libya we're seeing now, and the changing of the face of the way that the world's controlled politically and all the rest of it. But often you don't need a real problem. I mean, look at weapons of mass destruction in Iraq. All that was justified, all that massive loss of life and maiming of people for life, including untold numbers of children, was justified by a problem that didn't exist. They made it up. And this is what's happening with global warming, quote. They're making up the problem. They're using a frontman, or have up to this point, called Al Gore, though he seems to have gone absent without leave since the massive revelations of the emails at the climate center at a British university that showed that Climategate, showed that they were fixing the data to make it look like something was happening when it wasn't. Now, I mean, I'm getting worried for him, Lisa. I mean, I've not heard him lie for ages because I've not seen him. Of course, if I saw him and his lips were moving, he would be lying because it's exactly. Al Gore.
So this is a man that had one of the biggest carbon footprints on the planet.
Godzilla. He's got the carbon footprint of Godzilla, that man. And you have all these people flying to climate conferences in private jets. I mean, the ones at the core of this, they know it's a nonsense. And of course, there are now scientists. I think I saw one from Australia a few months ago, who was a climate change, kind of groupie, who's come out and said, no, actually, it's a load of rubbish. And the thing is that if you make what you want to happen and what you want to be said very financially beneficial for people, like you throw limitless amounts of money at research into climate change or global warming, all these buddy scientists are making a fortune out of researching climate change and all the rest of it. Now, two things. One, for them to come out and say, no, it's a load of rubbish, which they 90-odd% of them must know because it's child's play, would mean that they're actually giving up all this funding. So there's a massive financial encouragement to keep parroting the party line.
Well, don't we also have people like Al Gore and his mates, and I think even those in British government, either shareholders in companies or somehow associated with companies financially, that are now set up to sell carbon vouchers, so to speak, for companies to buy them from. So, there's money's going around and around and around, and we're paying for it with carbon tax.
Yes, and Al Gore set up a company which operates through the City of London with a man called Blood from former executive of Goldman Sachs. It's known as Blood and Gore, very appropriately, in the City of London, apparently. And that has interests, considerable interests in this whole carbon trading system. And it's a scam. And they've created it not just to create a lot of money for themselves, but that's always part of the deal whenever they do anything. But it's also to justify a tremendous number of things that wouldn't be justified otherwise. Not just carbon taxation, which is squeezing the people even more, but justifying things like smart meters and smart grids, for which there are fundamental implications in terms of human control. It's justifying the authorities messing in the fine detail of our lives. You can't do this, you can't do that. and we must be allowed to come into your home and see that you're, energy efficient and all the other stuff. And also, I mean, and this sounds on the face of it, Lisa, like a small thing, but I've got a book coming out in January. I've been writing it about 15 hours a day all summer because I had a really tight deadline before I headed for Australia, and I go into this in some detail. What I'm talking about are these light bulbs. I mean, it's the question is this, or the point is this. This is a real red flag and a real alarm bell. When something is so ludicrous, so ridiculous, and so obviously so, yet they still push on with it, then you know it's the agenda. And if it's the agenda of this global network, then it's seriously not good for humanity. And when you look at these light bulbs, these so-called energy efficient light bulbs, or apparently if you turn them on and off too much, they're less efficient than the ones we've had up to this point, which have been fine. And what you do, it's funny, I've noticed this in my life. What you tend to do with lights is turn them on and off, So you look at a situation where everything was fine. We had the light bulbs we've become associated with, etc. When one of those light bulbs broke, what you did, there was no drama, is you got a dustpan and brush and you swept up the glass and stuff and you put it in the bin and you put another light bulb in. That's very straightforward. It takes a few seconds. Well, if you could see the instructions from government authorities for what you have to do if one of these things breaks, one of these so-called energy efficient light bulbs, because they have mercury in them.
Yes.
And we've increasingly removed mercury from things like thermometers and other things because the mercury was dangerous. And so we say, okay, we've done that because it's dangerous. So what are you going to do next? We're going to have mercury in all the light bulbs, in all the houses, in all the world. And that's and it's just incredible. When you see what you have to do, basically what the authorities are saying is if you break one of these light bulbs, then basically anything short of abandon the property. One woman in America, I quote in the book, she broke one of these light bulbs, or one of the light bulbs broke in her daughter's bedroom. She then calls the store that she bought them from, and they said, "Oh well, ring this kind of emergency number with the state." She rings that, and she's told to contact a company to come and make the house safe. So this company turns up, one light bulb has broken, and it cost her $2,000 to clean up, and her daughter couldn't use her room for ages. That's one. Now, in America, they have billions of these light bulbs being used, or billions of light bulbs are being used. Let's start at that stage. And now, as with other parts of the world, in the European Union now, these light bulbs that we had before are banned. America wants to do the same, start pushing in through 2012, and Canada, and I know it's going on in Australia. Mm-hmm. And then you ask, where are these bulbs going to go? These billions and billions and billions of mercury-infested light bulbs, where are they going to go when they wear out? Where are they going to go? The authorities say you have to dispose of them in a certain way. Well, are people going to do that en masse? Of course they're not. They're going to end up in tips, and the tips are going to become infested with vast amounts of mercury, and it's going to eventually get into the drinking water in some places, in the groundwater in some places. And so you look at this, Lisa, and you say, this is insane. But not only are they encouraging people to do this, they're imposing it by law. You do not have an alternative to this because we're banning the alternative. Now, when they do that, you know that these light bulbs are fundamentally important to their game, to what they want. because when the absurd is imposed upon people, it's a great cover that they use, and it's called bureaucratic incompetence. Now, does that exist? Yes, it does. Does it exist at the level of this agenda, this network that is actually generating these changes in society? No, it doesn't. But it's a good way to hide cold calculation, and that's what we're dealing with here. And you know what I've uncovered in written in the new book in some detail is the connection between smart grids and smart meters, and which I know there's a lot of controversy about them in America too, in Australia rather. But it wasn't really a slip of the tongue, because there's a tremendous amount of opposition to them going on in America now, particularly in California. Then here we go again, Lisa. Right? The European Union wants the vast majority of Europe to have these smart meter and smart grids by 2020. Again, the world is moving as one unit on the light bulbs. It's moving as one unit on the smart grids and the smart meter, or the smart grid globally, as it's designed to be eventually. And so when that happens, what you're looking at is the family bloodline stroke secret society, a global transnational corporation at work, and this is how it works. Over the years, I've uncovered how a group of interbreeding bloodlines have emerged from the ancient world. They were the aristocracy and the royal families of the ancient world, all over the place, and they a great and very significant group of them moved up into Europe, where they became the European royal families and the aristocracy. And then when the people started resisting this blatant, in-your-face royal dictatorship that was imposed in country after country, then these bloodlines had to change tack, and they moved into what I call the dark suit professions of banking and business and politics and all the rest of it. And through the, very relevant to Australia and New Zealand, through the so-called Great British Empire, and other European empires, these bloodlines were exported all around the world to Australia, New Zealand, Africa, or the Americas. And then came this sleight of hand, which is called giving the colonies their freedom. And there's two types of control. One you can see, touch, and taste: communism, fascism, apartheid, where the people under that tyranny have some kind of fix. So they can't see the people in the shadows, but they can see the people in the public arena dictating their lives. And that kind of dictatorship can only go on for a certain amount of time. It can go on for quite a long time, but it has a finite life for a simple reason. The people enslaved by that tyranny know they're enslaved in a tyranny, and therefore they, if you like, they're sitting in a prison cell and they can see the bars. The greatest form of control, which is what happened after the colonialists apparently left places like Australia and America, is the prison without the bars that you can see. What we call democracy. I mean, democracy is equated with freedom. I love it. A democracy, let's take us through that. You have a vote every 4 or 5 years for people who've told you that if you vote for me, they'll do this. But there's no contract, therefore they have no obligation whatsoever to do in office what they told you they would do to get your vote. So they then go into power and they do as they bloody like. And then there's a farce called an election, where sometimes the people in the government change, but the people behind the people in the government don't change. The hidden hand doesn't change, and therefore nothing changes in terms of the policy. The same agenda is followed whichever party is in power. That's why informed people in America talk not about the Republican Party and the Democratic Party. They talk about the Republicrats, because it's a single party. That's what you find in every country virtually if you go into the shadows a few steps. And so what happened when the colonial powers apparently withdrew is they left out in those countries, including Australia and New Zealand, the bloodlines under different names, their interbreeding families under different names, and the secret society network which manipulates those people and their agents into the positions of power in these countries. And what they've constructed, which is how all this stuff relating to smart grids and global warming and all the rest of it can move as one unit, is they've created the global equivalent of a secret of a it is a secret society network, but the global equivalent of a transnational corporation. If you take something like McDonald's, they have a headquarters somewhere in the world, America, and then in every country they have subsidiaries, and those subsidiaries in each country carry out the diktat of the headquarters. So if you go into a McDonald's, if you must, in Moscow or Sydney or New York or South Africa, you're basically going into the same McDonald's.
Yes.
Now, what this global secret society transnational corporation does is basically the same. You have the headquarters, what I call the Spider. That's in Europe for historical reasons. It's also in America to an extent, but so often the America is given the gun, but the bullets are put in the gun in Europe, and America is asked to fire it or told to fire it. And so all eyes are on America, when actually the real center of this web is in Europe at operational level. And then in each country, you've got the subsidiary network of families and secret societies, and their job is to impose in their sphere of influence, their country, the agenda dictated by the spider at the center of the web. And in this way, the same things can be introduced at almost the same time all over the world. And not only that, the national subsidiary of families and secret societies also has subsidiaries in the cities and the regions of the country. And so it's possible through this structure for the spider at the center of the web to dictate right the way through into a country and then down into the community within a country. And this is how it works. And this is why you're seeing the smart grids and the smart meters and the light bulbs being introduced in country after country after country in the same way, based on the same lie. Because people like Al Gore, I've learned many things in the last 21 years of research, but one of them certainly is that if Al Gore's involved, it's a scam, because Al Gore is an agent for the spider, if you like. And that's why in 2000, when Boy Bush was blatantly scammed into the presidency with all that went on in Florida, Gore, in effect, compared with what a genuine person would have done, he basically walked away because he knew that it was Bush's destiny, because of the way the manipulation was not only done, but it was decided long ago that Boy Bush would be the president in that period, that he needed to walk away because it wasn't his job. He was just there to have the farce of apparent debate in an election to kid the American people they live in a free country. He knew that his job in this whole thing was coming up, and it was going to be about global warming.
He did. He acted like a child who was having a bit of a sulk. I'm going to take my bat and ball and go home.
Yeah, but I mean, he should have caused an absolute storm because it was so blatant. And eventually, of course, the decision to make Bush president was done by the Supreme Court, which had a Republican Party majority. So this is the thing. When I look at any country, and I look at Australia, I see the same things, Lisa. I see John Howard pursuing a certain policy with regard to using Australian troops in wars that they should have nothing to do with. I see the way that they push the agenda on for more and more control, more and more attacks on small business, because they don't want small business or small farms. They want corporations running the whole thing. That's why you've got all these financial and attacks and all this bureaucratic nightmare that's going on for small business and small farmers and all the rest of it. It's systematic. It's going on in Australia. It's going on in America. It's going on everywhere. They want the land too. They want people off the land. Part of this whole global warming lie is something known as Agenda 21, which is an operation orchestrated through the United Nations, to which country after country after country, best part of 200 worldwide, are all connected to this, signed up for this. And they've produced the maps under something called biodiversity of America in the new brave new world, and vast tracts of America are on this map, banned from any human activity. Humans can't go there. It's incredible. I mean, they'd have to reduce the population by absolute dramatic numbers for any of this to happen. But then,
that's the plan.
When you see this, and then you see things unfold, you can see what's happening. For instance, most blatant, what they want all the productive farmland because they want it to go to corporations that they own, like Monsanto and these other big food corporations, just a few of them that virtually control the global food chain now. They want rid of everybody else, and they want their land, and they want to ban them from producing food. One of the ways they're going to do it is, and they're doing it already, is by saying it's not safe unless it's done a certain way. And that certain way can only be done by corporations. But, this summer, the Missouri and Mississippi rivers were very, very heavily, bursting the banks because of weather conditions that happened. There was much bigger snowfall and a lot of rain, all the rest of it. Well, you might have seen on the news that the American Corps of Engineers came along and said, we have to explode some of the levees to release the volume of water so it protects people further down the river. Well, what they did is blow levees, which flooded incredible amounts of prime farmland all the way down the rivers. And of course, it destroyed all the crops of the small farmers because the overwhelming, that's what it was. And the people had to leave their homes because the rate of the flooding because of what the Corps of Engineers did. Literally a few weeks later, these farmers and landowners and property owners got letters offering to buy the land from the government, to buy the land through the Corps of Engineers that had blown the levees and caused all this problem. This is going on all the time. People like George Soros, like Tony Blair, like Julia Gillard, like George Soros, David Rockefeller, all these people, when they are Barack Obama, when they open their mouths, it is the cabal talking, not them. And George Soros, as suddenly this billionaire financier who attacks governments or countries' currencies and causes mayhem on purpose, he has been buying up not just farmland, but the ability to produce food, technology and companies, and at an absolute rate of knots at the same time when all this is going on. So, and this is a global thing. So if it's not hit Australia yet, it will if we don't do something about all this, because it's a global agenda to get people off the vast majority of land on the planet and into very tightly populated like cities, skyscraper cities. This is not me making up. This is in their own writings. So, and it's all based, it's all founded, the whole thing, smart grids, smart meters, these lights, which also, by the way, give off radiation and dangerous chemicals. Absolutely established by scientists it does that. This is why so many people feel ill when they're in among the lights. One scientist said, if you've got so and so and so and so, you shouldn't have these lights. And you're thinking, well, that's fair enough. But the government's saying they're You got to have them because there's no alternative. What are they going to do? Sit in the dark?
You can't actually buy them. It's very difficult to actually buy normal light globes now here in Australia. You've got to go to specialist hardware stores and things like that.
That's the idea. In Europe, Lisa, it's banned. It's banned already. You can't buy them, and it's illegal to import them. I mean, it's unbelievable. So there's that. Then there's all this stuff, Agenda 21 and the agenda for the land and all the rest of it. And then there's the carbon trading and all that. And it's all justified on a massive, provable lie, i.e. that humans are affecting the temperature of the planet. If you could see it, what I do when I come to Australia, I put a graphic on the screen, a graph of greenhouse gases. And on the left is a massive, massive chunk. It's about 8% of greenhouse gases. And I say, well, according to the propaganda, that must be carbon dioxide. It must be. But it ain't. It's water vapor and clouds. And what are we going to do? Ban condensation? I mean, let's legislate against condensation. And then next to it is a tiny little block, which is carbon dioxide. And the vast overwhelming majority of that block is naturally generating carbon dioxide. There's only a little sliver at the top, almost imperceivable, that is actually what humans put into the atmosphere. And it's a lie, and it's. Have you noticed too? This is another thing. Not only do they push on with things that are clearly ludicrous, it's the agenda then, but also when all the evidence comes out, scientists, climate gate, all this stuff that shows that it's a scam, they just keep walking. They just ignore it.
They absolutely ignore it. It stops being on the news. It stops being mentioned in any of the media. It's just as if the whole thing went away. But it just marches on. It's just not in the headlines anymore.
And that's when you also know that it's the agenda. I mean, there was a very well-known newsreader in this country called Peter Sissons. He was a national mainstream primetime news presenter for like decades on various major channels. And he worked for the last 20 years of his career for the BBC. And he came out in his, what they call it, memoirs, very grandly, and said that the BBC News had a strict editorial policy that global warming caused by humans was fact, and anything challenging that was not fact, and therefore should be not talked about. And he interviewed the one of the national spokespeople for the British Green Party, who was talking nonsense about this whole global warming thing. One of the things she said in one interview was, this is a national security issue. What? I mean, yes, I'm not kidding you. Anyway, in this interview, all he said was, but the climate doesn't seem to be playing ball with your thesis, does it? Because the temperatures are falling. And she said to him on air, words to the effect of, it's audacious that you should bring that up on the BBC, or you should say that on the BBC. It's actually to be true. And Sissons says in his book that this little interchange went right up to the upper echelons of the BBC, where his conduct was discussed for actually asking a clearly, blatantly relevant question of one of these climate propaganda agents from the new Church of Climatology, which is the high priest is, of course, Al Gore. And so this is what's going on. And in many ways, what we're talking about here, very, very relevant to Australia. I can see that from what I've been reading recently. But it's also a microcosm of the macrocosm. It's an expression of the way the blueprint works over everything, whether it's 9/11, banking scams, whatever it is, Libya. It is lie, 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 and the media takes the lie and reports it as truth, and there's nothing more powerful in making a lie seem real than to keep repeating it. I mean, Hitler talked about that. Make the lie simple and keep saying it is basically his idea of propaganda. And it works if people don't think for themselves and question. And then anyone that's challenging the lie, they are marginalized as kind of crazy freaks, conspiracy theorists. Conspiracy theories, that's now a term of mockery, and indeed a term of an unpleasant label. Oh, this person's a conspiracy theorist. Oh, yes, and you're a coincidence theorist, aren't you? You think it's all a coincidence when it's all blatantly happening at the same time in country after country.
But the word conspiracy now goes hand in hand with the word theory.
All the time. Sorry, Lisa.
Sorry, we're talking over each other for a second.
Sorry.
The word conspiracy and the word theory now just go hand in hand. People can't see beyond theory and see that it's fact. Conspiracy, fact.
Yes, that's right, absolutely. I've said that in previous books years and years ago, fully enough, that humans seem to have a genetic inability to say the word conspiracy without saying theory after it. Yep. It's like say conspiracy, theory. Stop myself. Can't stop myself. And it is, and this is calculated. You fuse the words together. So, for instance, what the media does, because I worked in the mainstream media for years, and if anyone could see the average mainstream media newsroom in whatever media vehicle it is, they'd never believe another word they ever heard on the media, really. Some of the most shall we say, mentally challenged people I've met have been journalists, and both who I work with and seen since. But what happens is they eventually establish, was in my books for years before that the whole thing about weapons of mass destruction in Iraq was a lie, a calculated lie to justify the invasion. Okay, fine. Okay, they got there eventually, or some of them did. But then the same people who have been exposed as calculatingly lying to justify the invasion of Iraq, they then start talking about global warming or the need to invade Libya. And the media just starts taking what they say as fact again. And it's like, is there anyone home? I can't see any evidence of it. And this is a really big key, because like I just mentioned, there's a technique that I've been calling for a long time: problem, reaction, solution, or no problem, reaction, solution. You create a problem covertly. Terrorist attack, government collapse, financial collapse, whatever. You then tell an unquestioning, through an unquestioning media, you tell the public the version of that problem and the manufactured villains or what is responsible for that problem. You tell that to the people. And at stage 2, you're looking for the reaction to the problem. And that is, something must be done. What are they going to do about it? Then those who've covertly created the problem and got that reaction do something, they then offer openly, in changes in society and legislation, solutions to the problems they've created. And they are solutions that without the problem, they would have had massive opposition from the public about. Now, the key area in this is where I'm going with this, is the communication by the forces that have covertly created the problem to the people of the fake cause of the problem. And that is the mainstream media's job. If we had even a passing reference to real journalism in the mainstream media, this key mass manipulation technique, problem, reaction, solution, could not work. It would fall at first base or second base anyway. The point where those that covertly created the problem are communicating their fake explanation to the public, journalists, real journalists, would look at it, they would investigate it, they would check it out, they'd see if it stood up, they'd see if it was true, and they'd find, as people like me and so many others around the world do in the so-called alternative media, you find that the official explanations are a nonsense and a blatantly manufactured fairy tale. That you would then communicate that to the public, and problem, reaction, solution is gone. It's broken down. It's collapsed. They don't get to the solution stage. But because we have a media that is little more than the public relations office for the official version of everything, then problem, reaction, solution works absolutely brilliantly. And we've just seen an example of that in Libya, where they followed the blueprint of invasion: demonize a leader or demonize a regime. Maybe sometimes, like with Mubarak in Egypt, that is justified. But then there's the little rider to that you who are demonizing Mubarak have been arming and funding him for the last 30 years. Now suddenly the guy you've kept in power and given the means to impose his tyranny upon the Egyptian people, now you're suddenly the calling for freedom for the Egyptian people. And what's happening in the Middle East and North Africa is we are stepping towards World War III. In fact, we're already in World War III. It's just not been officially declared. World War III began on September the 11th, 2001. And so far it's involved Afghanistan, Iraq, Libya. They're now killing thousands by unmanned drone bombing of Pakistan and Yemen and Somalia and all these things. We're involved in World War III. It's just not been declared. And I said in the mid-90s in my books that this was coming, not because I'm a prophet or some genius, but if you can find the evidence of where these people want the world to go, then you can predict pretty much the future. Because unless something intervenes in where they want it to go, it's going to play out, and it is. What they want is a third world war, which will officially break out in the Middle East. This is the plan, involving Israel and Arab countries, and they want to bring in Europe and North America. And I'm sure whether it's Gillard or whoever follows, oh yes, Australian troops need to go and support our allies and all that stuff, usual stuff. Yeah. And they want to bring that group in against Russia and China. Been saying it since the mid-90s. And what you're seeing now is, and I've seen for some years, is the emergence of China. But you're also seeing now, in the last few weeks even, the way China and Russia are getting closer and closer. You had the head of the so-called People's Liberation Army in China saying that there has to be much greater cooperation and joint operations between Russia and Chinese militaries. And you're also now, with what's happening in the Middle East, starting to generate increasing hostility, like physical hostility towards Israel. And my goodness me, Israel is massively involved in this. Not the Israeli people in general, but the House of Rothschild owns Israel. The House of Rothschild owns America. It owns Australia. It owns New Zealand. It owns the European Union. In fact, it created it. And Israel is there for the Rothschilds to use as a way of creating massive conflict in the Middle East. And
you go into Israel. Sorry, you go into Israel quite in depth in your latest book. I do, and I think it's one of the most important chapters in the book, because if people can really see what's happening there, then their eyes will be opened, I think, to the bigger picture. But if they can see that alone to start with.
Well, the point is about all this, and this is so important to get across. What the House of Rothschild has done, you see, I don't call Zionism. I call Zionism Rothschild Zionism, to constantly underpin the real creators and the real controllers of it, because it's not about Jewish people. I mean, no. The Rothschilds couldn't give a damn about Jewish people. They hung them out to dry in the Second World War in Germany. They're doing the same in Israel now. To them, Jewish people are just fodder. They're just a smokescreen to use and hide behind. But what they've done, the Rothschilds, through all this media control that we've been talking about, is they have equated, again, merely through repetition, that as with democracy and freedom, so with Zionism and Jewish people, that the two terms are interchangeable. One means the other. It does not. What people don't realize is very, very large numbers of people, Jewish people, actually not only don't support Rothschild Zionism, but vehemently oppose it. And delegations of these people have been to Iran to meet Ahmadinejad and say, the Zionists are not speaking for us. You've now got, at one point recently, something like 300,000 Jewish people on the streets of Israel protesting against the way the government is treating them. And what we need to happen, this is so important, is those that are controlling the Arab countries, not least the oil royals, the fake sheikhs. I mean, a sheikh, he's royal. What does sheikh mean? It just means wise person or old elder of the tribe. That's all it means. There's nothing royal about it, but they've made it sound like that because they're not royals. They're just people that are taking the country's resources for themselves and calling themselves royal to justify it. But if people in the Arab world, the people in general, would realize that their empathy shouldn't be with the leaders of the Arab world. It should be with Israelis. It should be the rank and file Israelis and Jewish people, because the same force that is controlling the oil royals and these other tyrannies in these Arab countries and imposing that tyranny upon the people is the same force that's controlling Netanyahu and whoever's in power in Israel to do the same on the Jewish people of Israel, the Israelis. We talk about Israel's done this, Israel's done that. Well, those 300,000 people on the streets of Israel ain't going to have done that any more than the vast majority of people in Britain have invaded Iraq or attacked Libya. It's this cabal that is doing it in the name of the people. And this is why rank and file, I say rank and file, we're all infinite consciousness, infinite awareness, but in the terms that are used, the general population in Australia and the general population in Israel, the general population in Egypt or wherever, need to come together and realize that we are all being manipulated, oppressed, suppressed, and controlled by this same force. And then the key element in any situation where the few, and they are a few controlling the many, falls, and that's divide and rule. What they've done in Libya through people on the ground, the idea that there weren't military and intelligence personnel on the ground in Libya from America, Britain, France, etc., is an insult to the intelligence. There's videos of them on YouTube, for goodness sake. But what they've done in Libya is they've got one faction to fight another faction to kill and maim each other, so that those that have orchestrated that and orchestrated the NATO bombing, so that the side they wanted would turn out the victor. The force that's created that mayhem, that slaughter, that savagery, has now taken their country over. It came out last week that this National Transitional Council, it's not, first of all, these are hand-picked people by the Americans and Europe. But there's another organization which has been set up by America. It's like a transitional financial organization. And that is what is controlling Libya and is funding the apparently spontaneous Transitional National Council. And so we see the movie, which the media, of course, play, because, I've said for years, most mainstream journalists are nothing more than movie correspondents. That's all they are. They're just telling you, they're giving you the background to a movie, which to hide what's really going on. And so through this means, they have got Libyan to fight Libyan, and now they're controlling the country. It was amazing. Talk about multitasking. Well, in the early days of this, in effect, civil war, but it wasn't really a civil war, because the civil war side on the rebels were merely basically actors in a movie, very deadly actors, a lot of them, for what was being orchestrated by NATO in the background. But during the early days, this group of rebels, which had no structure officially then at all, they managed, multitasking taken to extreme levels, to be dodging the bullets and the missiles, and take time out to create a new central bank of Libya and to do oil deals with Qatar. Because a lot of the funding of the rebels and arming of the rebels came through Qatar. And so now we even saw at that time, but now it's blatant, what Gaddafi, I'm no brief for Gaddafi, but he did a lot of good things for Libya. And I don't agree at all with someone being an unelected dictator for 40 years. But a lot of good things were done by Gaddafi for Libyans that weren't happening before he took over. And let's have a bit of balance here. But and the people behind the rebels, some of them would make Gaddafi look like a bloody angel. Some of the slaughter that's gone on that side of Gaddafi supporters. But what Gaddafi did, because he was aware, like Chavez in Venezuela, of some of the way this works. And he had a central bank of Libya and a Libyan currency, which in effect, to a very, very large extent, was one step back from the global financial system that's controlled by people like the Rothschilds and the Rockefellers. And they wanted that pulled in. They wanted that absorbed, and that's what they're going to have now. And of course, what they also wanted was the biggest oil reserves, known oil reserves in Africa, which are in Libya, so that they have them now. And it's also interesting that over the last couple of years, a number of pointers have come my way. And indeed, people like Ron Paul in America, the congressman, have actually asked questions about this now. That a lot of what is claimed to be gold reserves in the world are not gold reserves at all. It's tungsten. With a coating of gold. So where's all the real gold gone? And people like Gaddafi and Chavez in Venezuela are aware of this. And before the fighting broke out in Libya, Gaddafi was trying to get the African Union and African countries to have a currency based on gold, which he knew that a lot of the Western countries that seem to have these reserves of gold, they're not gold at all. This is the reason, Lisa, I only saw it about 10 days ago, why Hugo Chavez in Libya has demanded that Venezuela, has demanded that all Venezuelan gold that's held abroad in places like the City of London is physically returned to Venezuela. And of course, the most of the gold is just certificates. That's all it is. People say, "Oh, I've got all this gold." No, you've got a certificate that says you have. Don't mean you have.
It's not a piece of paper that's not worth 2 cents.
Exactly. So what Chavez is doing is saying, "I want my gold back," or physically. Because he knows what's going on, and now they're running around like headless chickens trying to find enough physical gold to send to him.
Don't you think that's just asking for trouble though for him? Isn't he just? Aren't they going to find an excuse to take over Venezuela?
Well, yes, absolutely they are. There was a man called Aaron Russo, who was a well-known film producer and television program producer in America. He was producer of the Eddie Murphy series Trading Places, apparently. And just before he died of cancer, just a few years ago, Aaron went public on what he knew about this whole conspiracy I'm talking about, because he said that a man called Nick Rockefeller, who now operates out of China, because the Rockefellers, the Rothschilds, etc., have massive connections to China. They have their people there, because when I talked about the Third World War, it's just another movie. Putin is part of it. The Chinese leadership is part of it. The American leadership's part of it. The European Union leadership's part of it. And the war is designed to change the face of the world, and to bring in what they want, which is a world government, world armies, to stop this ever happening again. Problem, reaction, solution, a world currency, and a microchip population, so on and so forth. So at that level, the players in this planned Third World War are all on the same side. It's the people that fight each other thinking they're on different sides. Anyway, so that's why Nick Rockefeller is based in China. Anyway, in this conversation, Aaron Russo talked about Rockefeller, who was a friend of his up to this point, tried to bring him in to an organization called the Council on Foreign Relations in America, which is the organization Rockefeller Rothschild controlled that dictates American foreign policy, along with Israel, i.e. the Rothschilds. And what this Nick Rockefeller said to him when Russo said, "Why? Well, you got all the money in the world, you've got all the power in the world, what do you want more?" And he said, well, the people have to be controlled, etc. He talked about the microchip population, where everyone was going to be microchipped so that they could know where everyone was at any time. And he said, if you join us, he said to Aaron Russo, you'll have a chip that's got a special code, and you won't be stopped like other people. The microchip's got a much bigger agenda than just electronic tagging as well. And this Nick Rockefeller said to Aaron Russo that he would, because this was before 9/11, he would see this major event in America, a terrorist event, and that he would see soldiers searching caves in Afghanistan for Osama bin Laden, but it would also all be a giant hoax. This is obviously before 9/11. But he also mentioned Chavez, that they wanted to remove Chavez and get rid of him, because that's what happens when there are people in countries that are not, shall we say, on script or on board. Then you have to find ways to remove them and put your people in. And it's maybe not a coincidence that Chavez has just been in hospital for quite a while with what seems to be quite a serious cancer. Because you can target people in many different ways. And see, the process of putting your people in power and putting your people in power in any political party in a so-called democracy that has any chance of forming a government, and removing through various means, whether by demonization and invasion, or whether by manipulated people's revolution, or just targeting them in terms of health. This process has now brought us to a point, Lisa, where this network controls virtually every country in the world in terms of politics, banking, business, and media.
You've been talking about this network since the early 90s, and I guess I didn't come across your work until someone gave me a copy of The Biggest Secret.
Right.
And as well as being probably the biggest book I'd ever read, I hope you don't mug about.
Well, you should see the last one. I still look at the last one. Human Race Got Off Your Knees and think, oh my God,
yes, I've just done that one too.
355,000 words. I've had the hands-on healing, you see. I've had the hands-on healing, and I've had the crystal therapy, but I've still got verbal diarrhea. I can't touch it. Nothing will shift it.
Well, that book was life-changing because, well, for me anyway, I found that there was so much confirmation in there for stuff that I'd suspected about world events and the structure of society, as well as completely blowing my mind wide open about just how big, how complex and how deep and possibly how old this rabbit hole really, really is. Did you have any idea when you were getting started that this is where you were going?
No, I didn't. I've always been, all my life, very, very skeptical about authority, skeptical about governments, skeptical about political parties, of whatever shade we're talking about. So that was a good starting point, really, because what I uncovered was, some of it was shocking, but some of it was, as you've just said about yourself, it was like, yeah, I'm not surprised. It had to be something like this. But of course, where it's gone in terms of so many other areas that people would, think bizarre, that was, to say the least, surprising and shocking.
I do want to get to that too, but
Yeah, and the thing is that if you are an expert in the 5 sense level of this conspiracy, you're an expert in 9/11, you're an expert in manipulated wars, in banking scams, in political scams and manipulation, you're an expert in the biotech conspiracy and the pharmaceutical conspiracy, you are still, even so, only walking around the outer rim of the rabbit hole. That's how deep it goes.
yeah.
And this is why it's so important that if you're going to really pursue this and find out what's really happening in the world, you have to suspend all preconceived idea. You have to get a blank sheet of paper in front of you. You have to wipe clean all your previous beliefs and perceptions and say, okay, information is going to be my guide, and I'm going to go with the information. Because if you have a political belief, a religious belief, particularly religious belief, or any rigid, non-fluid, immovable perception of anything, then you are going to start editing, censoring, or not going into areas where the information could undermine and put your belief systems into question. See, there are many, many people in America who are doing great work exposing this conspiracy on the 5 sense level. But they won't go into other areas that we need to understand why the 5 sense level works as it does and how. Because they have Christian belief systems, which if they go into these areas will be under threat. And thus, they don't go there.
Well, I kept thinking while I was reading that book, I kept wondering, how is this guy still walking and talking? Because you name presidents, prime ministers, so-called, captains of industry and leaders of the military, the media, medical and pharmaceutical organizations. You name them as Satanists, as child murderers, as pedophiles, and more, which we'll get to. Did you ever go through a process of doubting or fear about going public with all of this?
No, never. See, the way I work is I come across information, and it's come to me in the most synchronistic way over the last 21 years. There is some force handing me pieces in a puzzle. There's no question about that. I don't know what that force is in terms of the detail, but something's handing me pieces in the puzzle through something called synchronicity. And so what happens is a new subject will come into my life, and from that moment, information about that subject is coming at me from all angles. Then what I call put it on the back burner, and I wait to see what happens. And more information will come. Sometimes it doesn't, and if not, I leave it alone. But if it does, and it normally does, then it keeps adding and it keeps adding. It keeps cross-referencing. It keeps cross-confirming, maybe about a person, maybe about a situation, whatever. And there comes a point where that tapestry of information is compelling enough to me to go public with it. And my criteria is simple. It is it true? That's my criteria. Is it true, or does the evidence that I've seen make it almost certain that it's true, as near as I can get? Yes, well, I'm going to start talking about it then publicly. And consequences for me, they never enter the equation, because this is how all this stuff has remained unknown for so long. People who do know are frightened of talking about it. And also there's the other thing, that some elements of it are so fantastic compared with the world that we're told we're living in, that people won't go there because their mind can't open enough to encompass the fact that it's possibly happening. But certainly, and I'll talk about this in the talks in Australia, because I'm going to be talking for about 9 hours during the day, because what I do is connect dots. And so you have to talk about a dot, and then you have to connect it to the next dot. And so it takes time. It's not like, presenting a version of the world that people are used to, so you can do it in a short time. You can't with this if you want to do it properly, because it's a completely different explanation of the world on every level, virtually. But I'll be talking about the connections between secret societies, Satanism, and pedophilia, because they are connected. Now, I'm not saying that every Freemason is a Satanist or every Satanist is a pedophile. I'm not saying that. But these rings do connect fundamentally. And again and again, I have found people in positions of power who have been all three. The extent of pedophilia in the so-called upper cesspit levels of society is vastly greater than in the population in general, for reasons I'll explain in the talks. There's a reason why that is the case. And also the secret societies connect into Satanism. See, these bloodlines that come out of the ancient world, they're doing nothing now that they weren't, in terms of Satanism, that they weren't doing thousands of years ago. The difference is that thousands of years ago, they could sacrifice people openly because it was acceptable. Now they can't. They have to do it in secret, covertly. And they have a whole network of organizations that allow them to do that and not be exposed for it, except by people like me. And actually, talking of Australia, Australia is one of the great satanic centers of the world in terms of the Satanist operation, and Australia has a certain energy. It almost certainly is a great landmass of the former so-called Lemuria or Mu from way back. A lot of it crashed into the sea and great devastation. There's a particular energy about Australia, and they want that energy. And so the Satanists are trawling that energy and working with that energy. And just before the last book came out, literally as it was going to press, Human Race Got Off Your Knees, this document emerged in Australia of, I wouldn't say it was a deathbed confession because the guy agreed with it, but it was an explanation by an alleged high Australian Satanist from the Sydney Lodge. They call it the Alpha Lodge. And he was explaining how Satanists and Satanism runs the world, how it controls politics, how it controls Australian politics, how it pulls politicians into paedophilia if they weren't in it already, and therefore once they of course have partaken in that sickness, then they do whatever the Satanists tell them, because otherwise it's going to be exposed. There are, I've talked at length to people who've investigated Satanism in Australia, and there are television presenters that are very, very well known over there and have been around for a long time who are practicing Satanists, and politicians, goodness me, galore. And one of the quotes from this document, and I can't obviously prove that it's genuine. What I can say after 21 years of researching this stuff, that whoever bloody wrote it has a major understanding of Satanism and how it works. And he part of the quote in this, it was a long document. What I did was I put it in the back of the book as an appendix in full, the whole thing. And what he said at one point is this: politicians are introduced to pedophilia by a carefully graded set of criteria and situations that enable them to accept that their victims will be, quote, our little secret. Young children sexually molested and physically abused by politicians worldwide are quickly used as sacrifices. In Australia, the bodies are hardly ever discovered, for Australia is still a wilderness. This is what's happening all over the world. And I found it all over the world. And there are every now and again tips of the iceberg that come to light, like what happened in Belgium in the Dutroux case, where children were murdered by Dutroux, and it was found that he was a procurer of children for pedophilia. And they call them judges in Belgium. The investigating judge who got on the case immediately that the story broke started uncovering, as anyone genuinely investigating would, that this whole paedophile ring and procurement of children for paedophilia went into the highest or lowest echelons of Belgian society. And Belgium is a particularly important place in terms of paedophilia because so many people in the upper echelons of the system are paedophiles. And what you have in Belgium, of course, is the home of the European Union, the European Commission, and it's the home of NATO. And so you've got people from all over Europe and all over the world, from these levels where the paedophilia is rife, who are in Belgium. And so as a result, there is this insatiable demand for children to be sexually abused. That's why it's so prevalent there. In fact, I have seen a document in the Madeleine McCann case. This little girl that went missing from Portugal on holiday.
Yes.
And has never been found. And this was a document relating to Leicestershire police. She lived in Leicestershire in England, saying that one line of inquiry was that forces, shall we say, paedophilia network in Belgium had put the word out that they wanted a particular type of child. And someone had seen Madeleine McCann in Portugal and made the call and said, taken a picture covertly and sent it to Belgium. They said, yes, she'll do, basically. And she was then taken. And I've known for, best part of 2 decades that children are picked by, or they're chosen, some of them. I mean, some of them are just taken because they're children, but others are kidnapped by order for paedophile rings and certain paedophiles. And a lot of these people, a lot of these children are blonde-haired and blue-eyed, which is a particular kind of genetics that these families want. And a lot of these kids end up in places like the Middle East, where the oil royals keep them in captivity. And I don't know if this is happening in Australia, but again, it's the blueprint, and it's happening everywhere else, like in Europe, in Britain, in America, that we now have, and it's obviously systematic because how quickly it's come in. We have this epidemic now. I'll give you the British example of children being taken from loving parents by social services on the most outrageous and spurious excuses. And the family court system is totally secret. And they say this is to protect the children. It's not. It's to protect the system who are stealing children from loving parents. So much so that when social services come along, often with armed police, unbelievably, to take children from their families, the families are told that if they go public with the fact that this has happened, they'll go to jail for breaking the family court secrecy laws. And the social services have on-call psychologists to give them the verdict they want. If they want to take a child, then they say, well, we think the mother, for instance, is psychologically unequipped to look after the children. The mother says, well, I'll have a psychological test. I'm fine. Well, they have a psychological test with the hand-picked psychologist on the social services payroll, and of course the psychologist says what social services want them to say, and the children are then taken away. Not even often, if there's multiple children in a family, not even often given to a foster home or an adopted family together, but actually broken up. This is what is happening. About 10,000 children are taken from their families in Britain every year now, and it's growing. And of course, anything in this country, almost anything, that is horrific and part of this whole agenda invariably finds its way at some point to Tony Blair. Tony Blair is one of the has been one of the most active agents of this conspiracy for the last 15 years. And he introduced legislation, and it's happening around the world because it's a blueprint, which demanded that social services meet targets, figures for the number of children they take from families every year. How can you have a target when every case has to be taken on its merits? The target is because they want to bring in, they want children away from their families. And, this is another point about how long this agenda is projected forward. This is not organized by people sitting around a table deciding the next move. No. This is like a biorhythm chart. It's a script. It's an agenda that's projected decades and decades ahead at least, and then some. And there was a man called Aldous Huxley who wrote a book published in 1932 called Brave New World. And Brave New World was apparently a novel which talked about a future society in which not only did parents not have the children with them, they didn't even eventually give birth to children. It was all done scientifically, technologically. And he described a world where parents and children were no longer connected. He described a world where drugs was used to make the enslaved population, quote, love their servitude, etc. And when people have said to me in the past, what's the agenda? What do they eventually want? I've said to them, read two books, Brave New World by Aldous Huxley and 1984 by George Orwell. George Orwell is the one that wrote about the police state, about the surveillance, and of course about the perpetual war to keep the people in line. We now have that. It's called the War on Terror. Yeah. When do you know a war on terrorism is finished? You don't. And therefore it's a perpetual war. That's what we're seeing. Now, what's interesting, Lisa, is when I was writing my last book, I put together the connections between these two authors of, quote, novels. George Orwell, real name Eric Blair, went to the elite Eton College where the royals go, near Windsor Castle, just on the outskirts of London. And his French teacher was Aldous Huxley. Aldous Huxley introduced Orwell to the Fabian Society, one of these major secret societies within the web that operates out of London, but of course, as you well know, has very, very serious influence in Australia. Mm-hmm. And I mean, what's her name? The Prime Minister, Gillard, Julie. Gillard and Kevin Rudd, the previous prime minister, they're both Fabians, and the Fabian Society is massively influential in Australian politics. And Tony Blair is a Fabian. The Fabian Society created the British Labour Party and still controls it to this day, and the same with the Australian version, because the two are very connected. And if you go into the inner sanctum of these seriously significant secret societies like the Fabians, then you have access to the projected agenda decades and decades ahead. And if you have access to that, you can write prophetic novels that turn out, as Brave New World and 1984 have done, to be extraordinarily accurate in the light of modern events.
I actually have a question about this, because as you've pointed out in your books, that this agenda, it wasn't thought up over a beer last Tuesday. It's been on the cards for, if not hundreds of years, potentially even thousands of years.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
So we're talking about beings or individuals with the ability for long-term planning.
Right.
But what we're seeing now is what can only be called incredibly short-term and short-sighted decisions, environmentally at least. This new fracking that's going on now. We're talking about something that is absolutely devastating and completely irreparable on the environment. Why? This is something I can't make sense of, because if these groups, if this agenda has been so long in the planning, why are we getting now to a point where they seem so short-sighted? Because they do, if they want to create this paradise for themselves, why are they killing their potential paradise?
Well, to go into that means to talk for probably as long as we've already talked. What if the force that is behind this in the realms of the unseen cannot enter this reality for a number of reasons, and one of them is the atmosphere of the planet is
I see where you're going.
What it needs to be.
Okay, let's open it up to that then, because in The Biggest Secret, you did go where most people don't want to go, where no researcher had really gone before, because most researchers stop at the top of what they consider what is the visible pyramid. They stop with families like the Rockefellers and the Rothschilds and members of the Trilateral Commission and the Bilderberg Group and the CFR and all of these global secret societies. But you went beyond that to the people who are controlling and pulling their strings, only to announce that in fact they're not people at all. They're reptilian aliens operating from another dimension. And I have to say, when you first went there, even though you had me right up to that point, I thought you had gone off the deep end.
Right.
And I know many others did too. And I had to do what you did, which was put it in the sort of the too hard for now basket.
Yeah.
And sit it out for a bit. But speaking for myself, it is only when you bring in the interdimensional aspect of this whole control structure, once you can get your head around it, that it actually all comes together and makes sense.
Yeah, because what you're talking about is the common theme. In the early days, people would say to me, when I was uncovering and publishing the information about the historical story, about how these bloodlines have worked through the thousands of years, the question was, why would someone dedicate their life to advancing this agenda in 1700 or 1600 when they knew they weren't going to be around for it to happen? Well, so there has to be a common theme, and the common theme is what we're talking about. And these people that come and go are people coming and going in our timeline, in our reality. So someone who was here manipulating in 1600 will probably now be here manipulating behind another, body shield, in another under another name in 2011. So it's like they nip into this timeline, nip out at what we call death, nip back again, because we're consciousness. The body's just the vehicle that allows us to interact with a tiny range of frequencies that we call the world. And it does suddenly start to make sense, because when you look around the ancient world, the talk and the accounts of serpent gods or snake gods is just enormous. It's so far been found to be the oldest form of religious worship, serpent worship, which goes back at least 70,000 years into Africa. And the whole kind of ancient world was talking about this stuff. And the serpent gods, the ancient Chinese emperors used to claim the right to be emperor because of their genetic connection to the serpent gods. And so it was in Asia and Africa and all over. And what we're looking at is this, basically. There is a group of non-human entities which take a reptilian form. Some of them take other forms as well, but the reptilian one seems to be the dominant one. And they operate outside of what we call visible light, or the electromagnetic spectrum, where humans either directly through invisible light or indirectly through technology can see into those realms of reality. But they're just a frequency range. This world is like a television station, a holographic television station or a radio station. Radio stations share the same space as each other, but they don't interfere with each other unless they're very, very close on the dial, because their frequencies don't connect. Therefore, they share the same space, but they're completely oblivious of each other. And when you're listening to Radio 1, your radio's tuned to Radio 1. Then you move the dial to Radio 2. Now you're getting Radio 2. But Radio 1 doesn't cease to broadcast when you move the dial from it. It still exists. It's still broadcasting. You're not tuned to it anymore. And these vehicles we call bodies are vehicles that allow us to interact with this frequency range, because our consciousness, the eternal self, that which people are experiencing in near-death experiences, our consciousness is vibrating so fast that I couldn't sit on this chair or hold this pen or interact with this computer with my consciousness alone, because the frequency difference would be too great. So I take on, like all of us, this vehicle, which is an outer shell, like I call it sometimes a genetic spacesuit, which is resonating within the frequency range we want to interact with. Therefore, I can hold this pen, sit on this chair, and move this mouse. And what we are looking at in terms of these bloodlines, which have incessantly and obsessively interbred all this time. We talk about blue bloods. We talk about keeping the genes up, and the elite bloodlines and the royal bloodlines and all the rest of it. What does that mean? Why? Where is the origin that certain bloodlines have the right to rule, the divine right to rule, as they said about royalty and stuff? We have a head of state. You have a head of state. Come to that. About 2 hours from where I'm sitting in Buckingham Palace, who is only head of state of Britain and Australia, New Zealand, because of a bloodline. She had a different bloodline. She might be cleaning the throne, not sitting on it. It's ludicrous. So where does this come from?
Where did this bloodline originate?
These bloodlines are hybrids. We all have a massive amount of reptilian genetics. There's a part of the brain called the R complex, or the reptilian brain, which I'll talk about in Australia, because it's very, very important to understand this in terms of human behavior and the control. But these bloodlines, and this is talked about in virtually all these ancient accounts of the interbreeding between the gods, the serpent gods, and humans, creating this hybrid bloodline. And when we look at genetics, this is why I've had to research so many different subjects, not least the true nature of reality and this so-called physical world that isn't. To understand what's going on, we look at genetics. We look at a wall. I don't know. We look at a person. We look at a bus, and we see something that's taking apparently physical form. But what it is an energetic information field. And we read that, we decode that information into what we see as a physical object. Actually, it's a holographic object, illusory physical. So you look at genetics, you look at DNA, you look at the genetic structure of the body, and we perceive a physical body. Actually, it is an information field. I explain this all so simply in the talks in Australia. And therefore, these entities that are manipulating, they understand that the human body is an information field, and they have created these hybrid bloodlines which have a greater infusion of reptilian genetics than the mass of humanity. And they have basically dual-coded DNA. Part is human, one, and the other part is reptilian. When the human codes are open, their hologram projects as human. When their reptilian codes are open, their hologram projects as reptilian. And these bloodlines, because they have a greater infusion of reptilian genetics, i.e., the information field, the resonant vibrational field, then there is a far, far greater compatibility in terms of resonance and vibration between the hybrid bloodlines and these reptilian entities operating just beyond human sight than there is between the reptilians and the general human population. In other words, this vibrational compatibility between the two allows these hybrid bloodlines within the human world to be possessed mentally, emotionally, and, quote, physically, far, far more powerfully than the general run of the population, where that vibrational compatibility is nothing like the same. And so these reptilian entities have been manipulating our world for thousands of years and then some, by hiding behind apparently human form. And this is a very simple analogy that kind of gives the relationship of everything. You'll see sometimes scientists working with material that's too dangerous to touch. Sorry. So the material is put in a tank. The scientist stands outside of the tank and puts on these big long gloves that allow the hands to go inside the tank and works with the material inside in a safe way. Take the tank to be our human reality, take the scientists to be the reptilian entities, and take the gloves to be these bloodlines, and you've got the relationship. And so these bloodlines have had to, over thousands and thousands of years, they've had to obsessively interbreed because they are in their terms, perpetuating an information field, which, if they interbred with the general human population, would be diluted very, very quickly. And therefore, this is where you get all the interbreeding among the aristocracy and the royal families, and also the unspoken aristocracy and royal families that now overwhelmingly wear dark suits and operate in politics, business, banking, and media, etc. And so we see apparently someone human in the presidency, but or running this bank or whatever. But actually, if you could see deeper into their energy field beyond the limitations of visible light and technology, you would see a very different entity to the one that appears to be in power.
You know, baby boy Bush must have changed puppet masters over the years, because I saw a YouTube clip of him recently in his days when he was running for office in Texas. And it was a clip of him during a debate. And in the overall scheme of things, not that long ago, but he was articulate. He appeared quite intelligent, well informed. He didn't ask for the question to be repeated. He didn't stumble. You would not believe it was the same man as the one that was president.
Well, the thing is that these people are vehicles, and the possessing entity or entities, sometimes they come forward, and sometimes they stay in the background when there's no need for them to influence events, as there are at other times. And this imposition or stepping back will produce a very tangible change in the person's demeanor and personality, definitely. I've talked to so many people around the world who've taken part in these rituals, these satanic rituals, where these entities can manifest because of the energy environment that is created. It's like a stepping stone energy field that they create, which allows these entities to move through into these rituals. I have had very world famous people describe to me, including the British royal family, what they get up to in these rituals and what happens in these rituals. And if you could see the Queen in the rituals and as against the Queen you see in the public eye, you wouldn't believe it was the same person. They're just not the same. You know, it's like this schizophrenia where there was a woman who went on the Oprah Winfrey show a few years ago and talked about her life in a satanic family in Chicago. And she was saying that the family, a mother, etc., they were pillars of Chicago society. And no one would ever suspect what they did because she said what they were like during the day and what they were like at night was totally, completely different. She said words to the effect of during the day, these things were good, these things were bad. During the night, it switched. The things that were good during the day were bad during the night, and were bad during the day personality were good at night. You know, in other words, they seem to have all these moral values during the day, and then at night, absolutely the opposite happened. There is a massive personality switch, and that's when the reptilian entity or the possessing entity really imposes itself upon the hybrid vehicle. It obviously does that out of public sight, because if it did it in public sight, then we'd see what was going on. So it's, they talk about people like Obama and Blair and Bill Clinton as consummate actors. Well, they are acting. They're acting a part. And if you could see them outside of the public eye, well, you would have one hell of a shock at what they really are compared with the public persona. But one of the things that comes through from the reptilian personality through the hybrid is lack of empathy. This is a fail-safe mechanism of human behavior. If you have empathy, if you can feel or have empathy with the consequences for others of your actions, like abusing a little child, then obviously you don't do it and you don't want to do it. But you take empathy out of the equation, delete empathy from the personality, And there are no limits now because you have no emotional consequences for whatever you do. And that's why they can kill 3,000 people on 9/11. And that's why they can pepper bomb Baghdad and kill 1 million and maim 1 million people. That's what they can do in Libya, bombing whole cities of civilians while saying they're protecting them. They have no empathy, and thus no limits to what they will do. But they have to appear to have empathy in the public eye. Otherwise, they'd never get anywhere near power or public acceptance. And this is why you see Obama and, of course, the big daddy of this, Tony Blair, with their extraordinary levels of fake empathy, their fake morality. They have to act it because they haven't got it. You know, Obama is a cold, cold man, just like Blair is, just like Clinton, just like Father George Bush, just like Julia Gillard, a very cold woman. The first time I saw Julia Gillard, I'm not, just saying this, my blood ran cold. Seeing her, the energy that comes off that woman is unbelievable.
Well, you don't have to have her coming over your television. We turn her off immediately.
Oh, it's unbelievable. I mean, it's so blatant. But I have at least got into the country. They took a long time to agree to my visa, mine. To come into Australia because they'd rather me not be there. That's for sure. Last time I came to Australia, when I spoke in Melbourne, I got stopped at immigration, and came in. I got taken into this room, which was it was something like that room in The Matrix. It was just brilliant white, and this lady in uniform put this letter before me, and I had to ask me to sign it to just confirm that I'd read it, and it said that I must not cause discord in Australia while I'm there, and I'm thinking, well. That's done for every politician in Canberra, then, isn't it? They cause discord every bloody day. But the idea that you don't cause discord. If you look at the dictionary definition of discord, it means you'd never say anything. And this time, when I asked for a visa, they took some time. They said it's being sent to the government for basically discussion, and they took some time to agree to it, but they did. And of course they had to win. They always have to win. They said, yeah, you can come in, but you can't come in multiple times. You can only come in once. So there. I thought, well, I don't want to come in once, mate. No, it's no problem. But I think the decision they made was, or the kind of the thinking behind it was, it would give me more credence if they banned me than if they let me in.
Yeah, well, exactly.
So I think they're letting me in, but they are letting me in, but for that reason. But they'd rather I not be there. And it's interesting, to me, when I travel around the world and see these different countries, the quite, well, not really unbelievable because it's the blueprint, but the way Australia's government works and the way the Canadian government works, they're mirrors of each other. They really are. Of course, they've both got the Queen as the head of state, and they've got the Governor bloody General. The blueprint's there, so you would expect that. But it is, because I can't speak in Canada. They won't let me in.
I was just going to ask you that. Is there anywhere that they won't let you in?
Yeah, Canada. There's been a big campaign there from government assets, shall we say, to stop me getting in. I even went in for a legal case, and they stopped me there. And I said, look, I don't really want to be involved here. I said, throw me out the country. I'll be happy to go home, but you just have to explain it to the judge. We better let you in then. So I can get in for that, but I can't get in to speak.
As long as you don't talk to anybody.
And you have this situation where these governments like Gillard and the Canadian government, they unbelievably managed to speak the words without choking that that their countries are free and it's a free country and we're part of the free world, when they're tyrannies. you know. And it doesn't matter if it's Howard, it doesn't matter if it's Gillard. They're just masks on the same face, just as, you know, when the regimes apparently change in Canada. It's the same agenda unfolds.
Well, I'll have to send you a copy, if you haven't heard already, of a letter that most families in Australia received over the last couple of weeks about having our children assessed with a GP. This is children who are getting ready to start school. Have you heard about this one?
No, I've not. Can you send that to me?
I will. Yes, definitely.
Yeah. That fits again. I mean, we're talking a key word here: children.
Mm.
And I tell you, parents of Australia, and I say this to everybody because it's the same everywhere. You know, backsides and sofas need to part company very, very fast because they want your children. And if you've got grandchildren, well, they'll want them even more powerfully because of the way that they will have moved forward by then. Come on, enough, no more, because we're going to bloody regret it deeply if we don't make a stand now, and not just stop it going any further, but start rolling it back. If anyone says, "Oh no, I can't be bothered. It's a good game," well, look your children in the eye, mate. Look your bloody grandchildren in the eye and tell them you've got no time, or there's a good game on, you know. And it's interesting with this whole thing about the hidden hand being in control and politicians just being puppets, and it's in our face. If people just take a deep breath, take a step back, and look at it again, you have an underground operation in Australia called Pine Gap, right? But Pine Gap, it's not a million miles in Australia terms, of course, from Ayers Rock. They're working with this energy. They understand this energy because it's information, and you can use the natural energetic fields of the earth in very, very powerful ways if you know what you're doing. And no prime minister of Australia, whether it's Howard or Gillard or whoever, will have a clue what is happening in Pine Gap, which is American soil in Australia. The British Prime Minister, Cameron, Blair, doesn't matter who it is, will not have a clue what is happening in North Yorkshire, a place called Menwith Hill, which is a major American base and is officially, once you get inside into the inner sanctum, American soil in Britain. Obama, Bush, Clinton will have not a clue what is happening in Pine Gap or Menwith Hill or in the considerably more than 100 underground bases in America. So, next question. Who is controlling what's going on in those underground facilities, no matter who's been voted or scammed into power politically? Because it was going on when Howard was in power, was going on when now Gillard's in power, it was going on when Rudd's in power. What was going on in Pine Gap and American underground bases was going on when Clinton was in power, and Father Bush and Reagan and Carter, just as it is with Obama. This is who's running that? Who's just making the decisions about what goes on there? The presidents haven't got a clue. I mean, it's blatantly there's your hidden hand on that level alone that is in power, no matter who's in government.
Yeah, and you go into this, beautifully in your latest book, which is such a subtle title: "Human Race, Get Off Your Knees. The Lion Sleeps No More." And this is another time where you've come into my life at just the right moment, because this book turned up at the end of what was a very intense 12-month period for me of research and soul searching and personal insights that involved virtually every topic you covered in this book. It was quite bizarre. Right. I felt like we'd been on parallel journeys, because after 12 months of this, I got to a point where I'd made some very definite decisions or come to some very definite conclusions about things, even though some of them I thought were quite bizarre, but it felt very true. And I guess I was asking for some form of confirmation. And then your book shows up, and I thought, great, there's another lunatic in the asylum. I'm not alone.
Right.
You covered everything from the moon, reincarnation, HARP, chemtrails, straw man, ayahuasca, even the little things that were just sort of flyaway comments turned out to be something that was part of my research in the previous 12 months. It was extraordinary. What set you off down the path of the moon? Because it's such a huge theme in that book.
Well, the usual theme. I sat in my chair one morning when I was writing the book, and I got this very powerful, not quite voice, but very powerful thought passed through my mind out of nowhere, which was the effect of, the moon's not what you think it is. The moon's not real. I'd been looking at the moon on the quiet for a few years, actually, thinking it don't make sense to me, but it just came to me that morning. And most people would just dismiss that and carry on with their lives. But because I've become aware of a sequence that has come in my life over and over and over again, of some powerful thought introducing a subject, and then suddenly 5 sense information, experiences, documents, books, whatever, coming to me on that subject very soon afterwards. When this happened that morning, I thought, well, okay, I'm going to go with this. And so I put a few words in search engine relating to the moon's not real, and up came a book called Who Built the Moon? By two researchers who were looking at the extraordinary coincidences, quote, and mathematical connections between the moon, the earth, and the sun. I read that book. It made total sense to me. And that was the start of a sequence of events where information was coming about that subject from all directions. And I just fitted the information together.
Did you come across a book called Penetration by Ingo Swann?
No, not come across that one, no.
Okay. That was one of the ones that I started with.
All right. No, it's always started like that. I mean, the reptilian thing started like that. I started getting a few inclinations about this reptilian thing, and put it on the back burner. But then, I was traveling America in the sort of late 90s, and I met 12 different people in 15 days in different places around America who told me the same thing about they'd had experiences of seeing people appear human, then shift into a reptilian form and back again. And they were from all different walks of life and backgrounds, told me the same thing. So that's why I say there is some force that's been what it's felt like over the last 21 years since I started to consciously wake up to this. It's like I'm walking through a maze and some force is opening and closing doors so that I go down the right channels to find out the right things, where without that synchronistic guidance, if you like, I would not have, I might have been on book 2 by now, because the synchronicity has been unbelievable. The synchronicity while I was writing my new book coming out in January this summer has been remarkable again. There is a force that is trying to let humanity know what its plight is, and it's very clear that that's the case. But to hear that force, you have to open your mind to consciousness, because mind-body is a very low level of awareness. And if you only operate on mind-body, you're only basically going to be aware of the 5-sense reality. And given that 5-sense reality has been stitched up in terms of information by this cabal, basically the information that you're receiving to give you a fix on the world and yourself is from those that wish to enslave you. When you open your mind to consciousness, the higher levels of self, the eternal levels of self, then you get insights from beyond this reality, about this reality. It's like instead of, standing there staring at a brick. You're on top of the hill, and you can see that the brick is part of a house, and the house is part of a road, and the road is part of a town, and the town is part of a country. You get this much greater perspective of what you are actually experiencing in daily reality when you have this point that you can move your point of attention to a level of awareness that can see beyond this world. Then you see how everything connects. Use the brick analogy. If you're standing there staring at close range at a brick and someone says, "What is it?" They wouldn't be able to explain to you what it is because they wouldn't know. But if they take a few steps back, they'll say, "Oh, yeah, it's a brick in a house or a brick in a wall." It's all about point of attention. And when you get caught in mind-body awareness alone, of course, we have to interact with that while we interact with this reality. But when we become so focused on mind-body level of awareness, the five senses, then basically we are just disconnected from home, really. We are in this world and of it. And therefore, the information within this world is all we have to get a fix on what this world is and what we are and where we are and what the hell's going on. And of course, that information source is controlled by the global cabal. But when you open your mind beyond that and you move your point of attention into your greater consciousness, you're in this world physically, illusory physically, but you're not of this world in terms of your point of attention. So you're seeing things that other people don't see, and thus people who are in this world and of it look at you and what you say, and they go, "You're crazy." And it's not about being crazy or not crazy. It's not even about being right or wrong. It's being able to decode information of a certain type and being able to decode information of a much more expanded type, which is vibrating much quicker than mind-body. Therefore, mind-body can't access it. Only consciousness can. That's the difference. It's a difference of perception. And, so the same awareness can look through the same eyes at the same world, and they can see it completely differently depending on where their point of attention, their point of observation is of that world.
So
and what is
happening? This is where you've surprised me and many others, because you started out as a researcher on the Illuminati, and now you're at the point where you're writing and talking about some of the most incredible and deep and exciting spiritual aspects of life. You've become, and I know that you do get labelled, some sort of new age guru every now and then, but excuse me, this is not the sort of information you expect from an Illuminati researcher. It's actually some of the most spiritual text I've ever read.
Well, it's interesting, Lisa, because how did I start out? It's a long story. I had some incredible paranormal experiences. It's a very long story, which started me out. But the thing that made me really start questioning the world was when, after I started to consciously awaken, because all the way through my life, I'd rejected religion, and I'd rejected this world is all there is science. I think that which is another religion, but I'd not really looked at the alternative, because you get on with your life as you do. But when I started to awaken after 1990, I realized that there were, not to the depth that I'm doing now, but there were explanations about life that made total sense to me. And my question was, why isn't this taught in the schools? Why aren't there television programs about this? And it was obvious to me that this information was being suppressed on purpose. So why? And then you start the steps. So that's how I really came into this, was why is this spiritual information not available? Of course, then I went through the whole five sense level of the conspiracy, as you've talked about, and I still do. It's important we know about that. I mean, my website covers that every day. But you can't understand what's happening in this world. You can't understand particularly what we can do about it unless we understand at least the basics of the nature of reality and who we are. Because the foundation of the conspiracy is to keep humanity in ignorance of its true self, and to keep us in ignorance of the true nature of the reality we're experiencing. They know that we're decoding reality, and therefore they target our decoding system, mind-body, to decode reality in the way that suits their agenda. What we believe, we perceive, and what we perceive, we experience. And so they're constantly seeking from cradle to grave to implant, like a gigantic hypnotist, perceptions of self and reality, belief systems, which will then decode reality according to the belief, in exactly the same way as a hypnotist implants the belief that someone on the stage in a hypnotist stage show is eating an apple when they're actually eating a potato. But because of the implanted belief, the brain decodes through that program the taste of the potato when the electrical information reaches it from the taste buds, and the person thinks they're eating an apple when they're actually eating a potato. Well, this is humanity collectively. We're eating an apple or eating a potato, and we think it's an apple. It's the same principle. And this is why when you go, this is why I say to people, I don't have any beliefs. I don't have any beliefs. All I have are the perception of what is at any moment, in the full knowledge, as Socrates is supposed to have said in ancient Greece, that wisdom is knowing how little we know. And knowing that there is always, always, always more to know. And therefore, at any point, this is how I see it. But I know that next week and next month, I'll see it in a slightly different way or a more advanced way because of new information. There are no beliefs in there that are immovable, that are, that repel all borders. There's just the perception of how I see it at the time. And of course, that perception is based on information, research, and all the rest of it. But, we're living in an infinite universe and an infinite infinity. And therefore, there's always more to know. It's like, everything I need to know is between the covers of this book. All right. So the whole of the infinite universe, all that is, has been, and ever can be, is between the covers of that book, written by who knows who knows when, and who knows what circumstances. Yeah. Right, and a few can't control the world. It's a doddle.
Well, we've been talking now for 2 hours, and there is so much I didn't get a chance. I haven't even touched on. So hopefully,
that's why I talk for 9. You see. That's why I talk for 9. I need the time.
You do. Well, hopefully, I don't know if you'll have the time, but when you come to Australia, maybe we can actually do this again, because there's so much good. I'd love to ask.
Great.
But I thoroughly want to recommend to people this newest book, and they can get it at David's website, which is just davidicke.com. And I believe, is it on Amazon as well?
I don't know. I have nothing to do with that side of it. I just write them and then
handball
then
them.
Write another one. Yeah, and other people do the rest, and I don't really get involved. But certainly, the one of the quickest ways you can get it is through davidicke.com, because that's turned around immediately. And also, I think they're available in bookshops in Australia here and there. But I don't know, much about that. I'll find out a lot more when I get there very soon.
Okay.
But they're certainly available in shops all over the world, and for one simple reason: demand for them. Because if there wasn't demand, they certainly wouldn't want that kind of material in their shops. But in the end, it's like with sometimes in the media. I get onto radio stations for no other reason than the audience increases. Not because David Icke's on, but because of the information and people's interest in it. Yeah. People are getting more and more interested in it. I mean, when I started out in 1990, I couldn't fill a phone booth really with this information. But now, all the tickets have gone for all the Australian events, and they've just introduced another 500 for the Gold Coast event. I said to the organizer, "What have you done? Got the builders in? Where did they come from?"
I think there's more available in Melbourne too. So if you want to go and see David Icke when he comes to Australia, you land on September 11, I believe. So,
I landed on September 11th, not by choice, but by just the way it turned out. But, yeah, and then off we go, and it's going to be a very physically challenging period, but I'm sure a very spiritually kind of inspiring period, especially in that energy of Australia, which is the Satanists don't want that for no reason. They want it because they know what it is. It's
and you're also going to New Zealand, yes?
Particular, very powerful energy. Sorry again?
Sorry, you're also going to New Zealand?
Yeah, I'm going to Auckland. Yeah, I've been to New Zealand about twice, and so often, you go in, you get off the plane, you go to a hotel, you speak the next day, and then you're on the plane out of there. So, but this time I'm going to actually stay there for, I think, a couple of weeks with a friend of mine, and see some of New Zealand, which I know from the little bit I've seen is a beautiful place.
Just before I let you go, I wanted to ask you if you saw the movie Legends of the Guardian.
No.
Oh, you've got to see it. It's an Australian animation film about owls.
Let me write that down. Legends of the Guardian.
Yes. It came out when I was doing... That's only not that old, so it was only a year or so. But it's this story of owls and how one species of owl believe they are superior to all the other owls. And they go around kidnapping predominantly young owls of the other species, take them to their big cave, and they nominate, which one is going to be a warrior. The bigger owls tend to be turned into soldiers, smaller ones are workers. They get given allocated jobs. And to control these owls, they get them to look at the moon with their eyes open and fall asleep looking at the moon, and it's called moon blink. They moon blink.
Right.
And I was watching this going, oh my Lord, somebody knows something, because it was just extraordinary. They get moon blinked and then they become these robotic, zombie workers who just go about their business.
That is fascinating, because of course one of the significant symbols that these families use in their symbolic language, which is massive, is the owl.
Yes.
But that is basically a really good summary of the situation we're facing. And there's a number of these animated movies that have come out which have told the story. Basically, there was A Bug's Life
and
came
ants.
out where a few grasshoppers were controlling millions of ants through fear and intimidation, and the way they did it, and the words spoken by the leader grasshopper about what you need to do for the few to control the world were absolutely straight off the pages of Illuminati, mass mind control technical manual. Really, I mean, they do tell this story. It's and there's another one that just ants, just called Ants, wasn't it?
Yes. Yeah.
That was another story of how millions of ants were being led to total destruction by a few leaders. The tail's wagging the dog. That's the thing. And I was looking at it because obviously now I'm turning my mind to Australia, because nearly coming there, because I like to research places as close to the time that I'm going as possible, because then it's all fresh in my mind. But I saw the Australian population is for 22 million, according to what I saw this morning. 22 million. When you look at the resources of Australia, and you've got a population of 22 million, if those resources were shared out even vaguely fairly, then no one would want for anything on Australia. No one would want for anything. It's ridiculous. The size of the country, the resources of the country, the population size of the country, it should be a paradise. Same in Canada, but it's not, because the few hijack all the wealth and resources. And the people doing that are agents of this cabal, and it's happening in every country. And Australia is a blatant example of it, because the population is so small in relation to its resources that anyone is hungry in Australia. Anyone doesn't have decent house in Australia. Anyone wants for anything in Australia. It's ridiculous in a society in which a country is run for its citizens instead of its citizens being run for the people running the country.
Well, when you want to talk about want, when you come here, if you get the opportunity, and you may do as you go to Alice Springs, the conditions under which the original people of this country live, I mean, want doesn't even come close. And
yeah, but you see, they have to destroy those people. They have to. You go into Africa, you go into any of these countries where the West has taken over, and they target and marginalize and suppress the native peoples, because they carry knowledge from the ancient world that is the controllers do not want the public to have access to.
Have you heard of the card that has been issued to the indigenous population that controls their money?
What's that one?
I can't think what it's called now, the blue card or the green card.
Right.
They're government payments, because for most of them there's no work available, they can't get a job. Many of them are living on government benefit. But now most of their government benefit is paid into a particular card. It looks like a credit card or a debit card. And that can only be spent at particular shops. And it can only be spent on particular items. And they're told that it's for their own good, which always gets my back up, that it's to prevent them from spending their money on tobacco and alcohol and things. Then a very small proportion of it is actually given to them into their bank account in cash. Most of them live in these communities, or one that I'm aware of that I've spoken to, one of the elders there, her community is a several hours bus trip away from any shops. The only way to pay for the bus is in cash. The very little cash they get is enough to pay for the bus, which takes them then to the shops where they can buy specific things only. They cannot buy children's toys. They cannot buy their own child a birthday or Christmas present. It's not on the list of approved items. There's so much that's not on the list of approved items. It's not funny. And that's how they're being controlled now. And that's only working at the moment in the Northern Territory, but they've just decided to bring it into Redfern, I believe, in Sydney. And
well, I tell you, what you're describing is what they want to be the situation for everybody
yes.
in the brave new world. This is the thin end of the wedge, the starting of the process. This is what they want to do to everybody.
And this is where the quote that you talk about too, you mentioned it in the recent book that came out of the Nazi Germany, about at first they came for, I can't remember the quote, at first they came for the Jews and I wasn't
first they
Jewish.
came for the Jews and I wasn't a Jew, so I did nothing. Then they came for the communists and I was not a communist, so I did nothing. Then they came for the trade unionists and I was not a trade unionist, so I did nothing. Then they came for me and there was no one left to speak out for me.
Yes, and that's something I think all Australians need to be reminded of right now.
Yeah, it's something I emphasize a lot. If you think that injustice for others is not your problem, well, eventually it will be, because the knock will eventually come on your door. Because what they do, and they're doing, is picking off different sections of society, demonizing them, and then when that's all sorted and people say, well, it's not my problem, I don't like them anyway. You don't have to like them, mate, but it's an injustice. Do you want to only challenge injustice and get people you like? And anyway, then, oh God, yeah, turn my thing off. And then we have a situation where they go to the next one and they do the same to them. Then they go to the next group, they do the same to them. And then eventually you reach the situation with the pastor that said those words in Nazi Germany. Then they came for me and there was no one left to speak out for me. And at that point, it's too late. And it's not too late yet, but it's getting close. We need to start moving very fast.
Well, one thing I did like about your book is that even though, we're talking about pretty heavy subject matter here, you do also show that there is a way out. There are solutions. And that, I think, is very, very important. There's enough people jumping up and down and screaming about what's wrong. We need to start talking about what's right and what can fix what's wrong. And, we need solutions.
Yeah.
So
yeah, we do, but I'll be talking about that. The whole of basically the last section of the 4 sections of my talk in Australia will be about that.
Yes, good.
And it's about removing. It's not so much solutions; it's removing the cause of the problem, and the cause of the problem is us. And we can cease, therefore, to be the cause of the problem. That's the great news. It is in our hands to a very large extent.
Yes.
Because the power that's used to control us is the power we give away to those controlling us every day. We take it back, it's over. But to do that, first of all, we've got to understand the true nature of who we are. We've got to understand the power we have from that, and we've got to let the fault lines of divide and rule go. Injustice against an Aborigine is an injustice against me, and I live in Britain. 13,000 miles away, is it? A long way anyway. It has to be like that, because otherwise injustice is like a cancer. It just grows and grows and grows, and eventually hits you. And so we have to stand together. Like I think I said earlier about Jewish people in Israel standing together with Arab people in the Arab countries, because the masters of the Arabs and the masters of the Jewish people in Israel are just agents of the same force. That's why we have to stand together. And if we think, by the way, that politics is going to change anything, well, we'll think that forever and it'll never change. We have to change. We have to change the situation, not politicians. And one of the things that people do, appalling as so many politicians are, is we say to them, what are you going to do about it? Well, what's that doing? That's giving your power to these politicians you say are corrupt, and they are, who have this agenda. So when we say, what am I going to do about this, then the power comes the other way, and we take it away from them. That's the direction the power needs to come, not towards them.
Yeah, there's another quote, which I don't even know who said it, but it was, I always said that somebody should do something until I realized I was somebody. Yeah,
I mean, what was it Gandhi said was the effect of you are the change you've been looking for, or you are the ones you've been looking for. You're the ones you've been waiting for. I mean, we wait for the cavalry to come over the hill with a bugle blaring, and we are the cavalry. So don't wait. Just look in the mirror, you'll see it. Yeah. Well, I better go and I'm sitting here. I've not even had a bath this morning.
I did get you just after you woke up, so.
I did, you did, yeah. But never mind. There's no one else here, and that's very comforting for anyone who might potentially be here and see me before I've had a bath.
Well, have a great day, and I look forward to meeting you when you come to Sydney.
That'll be great.
Lovely.
Nice talking to you.
You too, David. Bye-bye.
See you soon. Bye.
Bye.